Hi guys, it is Aoife from Fred BC Died Laughing and I'm here with my weekly wrap up. So I got a good bit read this week. I got 4 different YA kind of fantasy books read, which is a great week for me and I can't wait to tell you all about it. So the first book I finished this week was actually an audiobook I've been listening to for a couple of weeks, and it was The Crown's Game by Evelyn Skye. And this one, it was one I really enjoyed. This is kind of a YA historical fantasy in a way. It's set in Russia. And it is about 2 different people. There is Nikolai and there is Vika, and the 2 of them are something called enchanters. So they were born with magical abilities, and in Russia the Tsar can only have 1 magical enchanter, so the 2 of them end up in something called the Crown's Game, which they're basically competing, kind of trying to outdo each other with their magic, and become the Tsar enchanter. But one of them will die at the end of this game, so it is basically a game of life or death. Whoever ends up being the winner, you know, is the only one left alive at the end of the game. I just really enjoyed the magic in this, and the characters, and the setting was wonderful. Like, if I had to describe this book, I'd have it like, it's kind of like Shadow and Bone, kind of the Russian aspect of Shadow and Bone, plus the Night Circus, like that competition, the magical competition in Night Circus, and then it's all wrapped up in kind of the land of Anastasia with the Tsar and the Tsarina and the prince and princesses and stuff, and I loved it. I just thought it was so good. I was just so there. The audiobook was just absolutely brilliant. I loved the audiobook. It was narrated, I think his name is Steve West, the guy that narrated it, and he even did like Vika's voice really well, like a female voice really well. He had all the accents were done so well. Like some of the kind of like, say, the richer Russians, they all spoke French as well, and he was able to do kind of a Russian accent with a little bit of a French twist, and I loved that. I thought it was really good. I was just so there all the time. I could see everything in my head. Everything was just described so lovely. Really enjoyed it. I don't want to say too much, obviously, because I don't want to spoil it, but I will say this was just a really great, magical, wonderful historical fantasy, and had a lovely relationship in it. It had a lovely kind of build-up of relationship as well, like a build-up of romantic feelings, and you could really feel kind of the chemistry between the 2 characters and their magic kind of, you know, drawing each other into themselves, and, you know, the way they were attracted to each other's magic and how their magic called to one another. I loved that. I thought it was done really well. So I ended up giving this book a 5 out of 5 stars. Really more because, like, I say, like, the whole story as a whole would be like a 4.5 stars, but the added really good audiobook experience for me, just overall, I had to give it a 5 out of 5 stars because I really enjoyed it. The next book I read was One Dark Throne by Kendare, and this is the second book in the 3 Dark Crowns trilogy, and I really enjoyed this one as well. So this one, obviously I can't say too much about this, but this world is basically about 3 sisters who are 3 queens, and basically one of them can only be queen at the end of this like ascension year, it's called, and they all have like different powers. There is a poisoner queen, a naturalist queen, an elemental queen. I think it's an elemental and naturalist as well as the poisoner. And in the first book I thought it was really interesting because you don't know each sister well enough. You're kind of getting used to all of them. You can figure out who the favourites is, you know, who you want to live, who you want to die, like, do you want any of them to die? And they all seem like pretty good. This book kind of changes things a little bit. Like, you have a very clear kind of evil queen in a way, I guess. It's very clear who, you know, who you're supposed to dislike, and I did very much dislike her. More so, like, you know, I'm kind of like, okay, even if things maybe get better and she starts behaving better, but she was cruel to animals and stuff, and I wasn't there for that. But yeah, this one was really good. I think it's pretty long. It's like over 430 pages long, so like there is a good bit in this to read. I had a bit of an oopsie, and I ripped off a couple of pages by accident, and this is a library book, so I had to tape them back together. I had a little bit of an accident, so I hope I don't get in too much trouble from my library from that, but you know, I did try and fix it, so hopefully it'll be okay. But yeah, really enjoyed this one. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I do recommend it for people who liked 3 Dark Crowns. The third book I read this week was Unraveling by Sara. So this is the second book in her Unblemished series, and I will say one of the one of my main pros for the series, the beautiful covers. This cover is just stunning for this book. The first cover was stunning as well for Unblemished. I think the third book is called Unbreakable. Not as mad about that cover as I am with the others, but this cover in particular is really gorgeous. I love it. So this is following on with Eliana Ember, who is a girl who was born with a very large birthmark that covers half of her face, and when her mom mysteriously dies one day, she ends up finding out that there are kind of like these other worlds beyond the world that she knows, beyond the New York that she has grown up in, and they're called reflections, and she ends up being brought into one of these reflections, where it turns out her mother is originally from, and it turns out that there's like magic in this world. People have like all these different kind of powers, and Eliana is very special in this world, and her birthmark is very special and a source of immense power in this world. So she ends up, in the first book, she ends up kind of going on this adventure, falling in love a couple of times, and also kind of really learning to love herself and loving her birthmark and loving who she is and who she was born to be. And I liked the first book. I didn't love it. I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars. This one I also had some problems with. Now, as I will say, I love the covers of this book. I love the world in these books. The world is very well thought out. It's very elaborate, and it takes a while to really understand the world in this book. And going back into it after a while, few months off of reading the first book, I was still a little bit like shaky at first in terms of the different reflections, because there's a few different ones, and there's a few different kind of lands and worlds within our world kind of thing. And so it took me a while to really kind of feel comfortable with the world again. But I do love the world. I love the magic in the world. I love the fact that all these different people have all these different kind of powers. They call them their callings. Like, some people can have like calling for healing. Other people can transform into animals. Other people are just, are elementals, kind of like they can warp the weather and stuff like that, like create storms. Like, it's really cool. And I think all of that is excellent. I really love that. My main problem with this series, or this trilogy so far, has been down to the characters. I just really hate a majority of the characters. I really don't like Eliana. She just gets on my nerves. I don't know what it is about her. She just manages, everything she does just really annoys me. And I just want her to shut up like so much of the time. And I don't know, I don't need like more than half a book of her just like not knowing how she feels when it's very clear how she feels. I felt like some stuff happened in this book as well that wasn't explained. Like, one character who appears halfway through, who was in the first book and then he appears halfway through, ends up being like a captain of a pirate ship. And I felt like that was really random, and I don't think it was explained properly how he became the captain of that pirate ship, unless I completely missed that. But there was just some things that happened where I was like, wait, hang on a minute, but how did this happen in the first place? And I just felt like it wasn't really explained as well. My favourite character in this is still Skye, who I said was my favourite character in the first book. He is definitely kind of the more complex character, and the more kind of, he has the most character growth, I think. I gave this really kind of like a 2.75 stars. It's really kind of like a week 3, but if I had to characterise it, I would make it a 2.75 stars if I was to be like really panicky about it. More so because I just felt like when I was like 50% through, I just wanted the book to end. I was just so done with the story, but I didn't want to DNF it. I just got really exasperated with the story, and I was just begging for it to end by the end. So that was a little bit of a shame for me. So yeah, so a week 3, technically a 2.75 stars. And the last book I finished this week has been Magic Study by Maria V. Snyder. This is the second book in the Poison Study series, and I read the Poison Study series, like the trilogy, when it was the original trilogy years ago, before I was on BookTube, and I absolutely adored it. I reread Poison Study last year, last February, so like almost 2 years ago, and I loved rereading it. I love this story. This is a story I know I will always go back to. I will always be able to reread. And I'm actually going to do a video about that soon, about the books I know I will always reread. The books I'll always be happy to reread. And this is definitely one of them. So I found Magic Study and Fire Study were just in my library, so I just grabbed them because I was like, I do want to finish my reread of the original trilogy. Because there are a few new books after this one that I have not read, but I will get to them hopefully next year. And this one, basically, I should say what Poison Study is about. Poison Study is about a girl called Elena who is in jail. She's about to be executed for murder, and she ends up getting a second chance at life by becoming the commander. So the commander, who is kind of like almost like a dictator in a way, of the country she has grown up in, she has to become his food taster. So she ends up being like kind of this trained in tasting poisons, and she ends up on this really huge journey of like self-discovery and adventure, and gets wrapped up in all these like political schemes, and it's really cool. It's really, really good. And this just follows on with some stuff that she learned about herself at the end of poison study, and it goes on, and she's like going into a new land and learning new skills and learning so much more about her past that she never knew about, like a family she never knew. And this one is just as good. I just love this one. I love the characters in this. I love the romantic relationship in this. I love the world building is amazing. Like this book, you're getting a whole different world, a whole different country than the one you're getting in Poison Study, and it's just so rich, and there's so much detail, and you're learning all about like the different clans in this land, how they all interact. They all have specific cultures and specific histories, and it's really, really great. And we're also seeing Yelena have kind of some trouble coming into this world. Like she has grown up in a kind of like a very totalitarian like country, and where everyone has their job, everyone has like a place to live and a job to do. She's not used to things like beggars and stuff like that, and we see her confusion there, and her confusion is just as to why like one way of ruling is right when, you know, you end up people being poor and begging for food and begging for money, where, you know, and then people are in this country are criticizing the country where she is from, which is where, you know, totalitarian, everyone has their job, and you see her struggling to come to terms with stuff like that, and I just really enjoyed that was in there. I also love, like, this is, I think, strictly goes under YA fantasy, and I wouldn't actually like really say it's YA fantasy, because she's like 21 years old in this book, and I love that she is an adult. I love that she is older, and she's so much more kind of relatable because of that. And yeah, I just love this book, and I love this trilogy. My first time around I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. This time around I think I gave it a 4.5 out of stars, just because near the end, like the very end, kind of started dragging a little bit for me, and I was like ready for it to finish, and I got to like the very last chapter, and I actually, instead of like, if I get normally to get to the last chapter of a book, I will carry on, I'll read through it and I'll finish it, where this one I actually put it down and I went and did something else, and I think I watched some YouTube videos, and then I went back and then I read the last chapter, just because I was a bit like I'm just like not bothered to read another chapter, and like that's odd for me. So yeah, so I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, and I'm reading Fire Study, which is the third book at the moment, and I'm only like a chapter in at that, but I am enjoying that as well. But yeah, I love this. I love the Poison Study series. Everyone should read it. Yeah, it's great. So that's everything I've read this week, and all my thoughts about all that I read. Please let me know what you guys think. If you've read any of these books, the books that you've been reading, I want to know everything. So please leave a comment down below, let me know, and like the video if you liked it. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys again next time.